Australians by nature, although I worry about the hatred we reflect in the public debate today and on social media, but by nature we're pretty easygoing. We assume most people are going to be basically decent. And sometimes I think it makes us a bit naive about the intentions of others in the world.
Society-wise, I think you're quite right. Australians still want to be loved. And if you're a real tough power, and we are, I always say to people that we have an extraordinary military potential. We're just not realising it. We've got the 12th largest GDP in the world, and Russia is the 13th largest GDP in the world. That's extraordinary.
It's worth saying that again. It's extraordinary. Russia is seen as a global military power.
Yep. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers, nuclear deterrent, thousands of tanks.
None of us want to live in that sort of society, but it makes the point, doesn't it? That, people say, oh, we're not big enough to look after ourselves.
Correct. That's the point it makes.
That's the mistake.
That's the mistake. And I've had a lot to do over the years with Israel, and I've been fascinated by the defence problem from a professional point of view. And so many people say to us, wow, why should we have a defence force? Why should we put money into it? Why should we look at defence seriously? We couldn't defend ourselves against X. Yes, we could. We have a well-educated population. We have a relatively homogenous and society and culture. If people don't realise that they live in the best country in the world, then I'd invite them to go somewhere else, because this is the best country in the world. And if you are not in the privileged position that I might have in this country, your chances of getting to a privileged position are better than anywhere else in the world. So. And since the end of the Second World War, or really since about 1942, 43, the chance of us being invaded has been zero. The chances of us having to stand up has been pretty well zero. We've tried to contribute to the stability of the world by sending small forces to work with the Americans or the Brits, or work in coalition. And with one very minor exception, we've never conducted a military operation outside of a coalition. So we are coalition partners. The problem we face at the moment is that the world has changed. The world has changed since the 2016 Defence White Paper, which everyone is working on. It was the best Defence White Paper, and over the last couple of years, we have produced the Australian Defence Force at the best standard, best equipped I've ever seen it. But the world has gone ballistic in that period of time.
Yeah, no, I want to really pursue that, but just before we do, I'm fascinated by history, and all great military leaders are. A lot of people debunk history, and it's very badly taught. But economists understand history. Yep. A good political leader will understand and read history. Yeah. And the military understand history is vital, isn't it? Yep. Because you can learn not only what to do, but what not to do.
And here I am. I've now been a politician for a year. The greatest disadvantage that I have is I do not have the intimate understanding of our own political history. I haven't lived the last 20 years of political history, and it is a great disadvantage. But a military leader who doesn't understand history is stark raving mad. History which goes from the lowest tactical level, which our war histories in the First and the Second World War were brilliant at.
I was talking to retired Admiral Andrew Robertson recently in one of these conversations, and one of the things we got to, just on this history, because it really tells you a lot. When people say, no, Australia can't do it, we're too small, we're defenceless, so don't even try. Yeah. It's worth remembering that we'd only been a nation for 6 or 7 years when the federal government, concerned about what was happening in Europe, recognised that something ugly might be coming, and they ordered a Tier 2, a major navy. And it sailed through the Heads here in Sydney 5 years later.
Yes.
It fired the first shots of the First World War.
Did too.
It secured the Pacific, which was occupied in many parts by the Germans at the time. People forget that.
Yes.
A nation of 4.5 million, only 7 years a nation was prepared.
And then, of course,
we started to prepare and was when it broke out.
Absolutely.
Second World War, during the 30s, we were asleep. We were more with Chamberlain than with Hitler, despite Japan. And in many ways, I think we let ourselves down in the Second World War. We thought Britain could look after us. Singapore showed they couldn't. Yep. And I'm not being critical of Britain there. I'm just saying we should have been more alert.
Correct.
At the peak of the Cold War, we had a very effective Air Force, a significant army, and a very powerful navy. But now, at this time of great change, which you're about to come onto, as a lot of people have been saying, we seem to be asleep and to put a bit of focus on it, we're so busy tearing ourselves apart about domestic political issues, we're forgetting about the things that we need to unite on. The gorillas on the horizon, economic and even strategic. So that changed strategic environment, to get back to what you were
and I think
leading into?
I think that the strategic environment has changed dramatically, and I think there are two major changes. And the way that I put it is the first major change is that our great and powerful friend, the United States, no longer has the military resources to meet the expectations of all its allies. So the US commits itself to being active from the Baltic, through the Mediterranean, through the Atlantic, down into the Gulf, across the Indian Ocean, up through the South China Seas, into the Pacific, into the Atlantic, and all areas between it. At the end of the Cold War, they structured their military, they had been structuring their military on the basis that they could win simultaneously two big wars and a small war, as I said, simultaneously. That's extraordinary. They were prepared to pay to have millions in their defence force, to have 600 ships in their navy, to have an air force second to none. They've lost interest in that. They are no longer prepared to pay for that. The discussion in the United States at the moment by those who are interested in military affairs is to the effect, can we win one war? Now, every nation expects what we expect. Malcolm Turnbull, I remember, in his very famous and very successful meeting with President Trump, said that the American military is the centre pole of Australia's defence. If it is, we're in big trouble, because the American military, after 14 years, 15 years of war in the Middle East, 8 years of President Obama and 7 years of sequestration of arbitrary cutting by Congress, they are not sure they can win one war. So that's the first thing that changed. The power of our great and powerful ally has changed. And we can say to ourselves, we are the greatest benefit in the world of globalisation. We trade across the world. We're a regional superpower. As we were talking about before, our GDP is larger than Russia's. We trade and trade and trade, and we're fabulously wealthy. All of this because America was prepared to pick up the security bill for the Western world. Now they're no longer prepared to do that. They're being challenged, and this is the second thing that's happened. The first thing was the diminution, comparative and, well, real and comparative diminution of American power. The second thing that's happened is that throughout the world, and I am very reluctant to ever mention in this context China. Because we know that China is our biggest trading partner. 30% of our exports go to China, and we need it. We need China. We should welcome China into the world, but we should welcome it from a position of strength, entire strength, economic strength, government strength, military strength, social strength, etc. But the Americans aren't as polite as I am, and in their national security strategy, the Americans say that the West faces the challenge from four nations and an ideology. Those four nations are Russia, Iran, China and North Korea. The ideology is obviously Islamic extremism. And we're doing okay with Islamic extremism. We're belting it down wherever we find it, fighting beside our Muslim brothers. And we'll be doing that for the next 100 years. And, you know, IS as a caliphate has gone. The Islamic State as a caliphate, a geographical caliphate, has gone, but there'll be another one. There'll be Islamic extremism will rise again.
You've got a horrendous number of very, very, very highly trained jihadists out there, potentially including in this country.
Yes, that's quite correct. And we also have, you know, people. We have good police forces. We have good intelligence agencies. We're knockers of ourselves, but we run a good society, and we've done very well. Tomorrow we may fail, but it won't be the fault of our intelligence and our police forces.